Okay, so to start with, let's look at where we were at the end of last session. We created a grid layout page with background image, put the logo in, the BBC One logo in, created a little bit of a navigation, used some transparent colours, created sections and then put articles in them and all of the contents of those articles. And so this week's work is largely just tidying that up, inserting a couple of other elements, albeit they'll be blank, and then hopefully you will have enough there to kind of reuse the techniques and construct your own basic web page for the practice NEA before we move on. So the endpoint is this. Some tweaks, putting in some extra information here, changing the font. I haven't really done anything to the top part of the page, but the font change would have made this look a bit different. Changing the colour as well, so on the main page it's actually black is the colour of the links there, and a kind of reddy colour there, whereas we've just got all red at the moment. A box for related links, a box with similar programs that takes over the whole width of the page, and all of those techniques together will provide you with more than enough to produce your first draft at least. Okay, so let's start at the top of the document and work our way down. So in the import, before we had just, and I've just noticed actually I've not changed the font family here to later. I've changed the font family to later, and that should make quite a bit of difference overall. So a quick look at the page with that and the way that it looks versus before. Yeah, it's just a little bit less angular than what we had before. So the first thing I've done is change the title to later, which is a font from Google again. Put that into the font family, and then moving down, haven't really done anything to the name or to the BBC One logo. So what I've done is I've collapsed them. Just click on the arrow there, I'll make it disappear. Left the menu alone, left the main content section we've created to itself, and the article to, or the article image. The article, we've added in this line here, position relative, and that's entirely to do with a technique we need to use to be able to position this bit of information here to the bottom of the box that it's in. And so we will get to that. Let's do the tweaks first. So for all the links, originally they were red, or a dark red, and so I've had to insert some rules, and the rules I've inserted relating to the colour are here for a new class called secondary article. I'm also inserting some new classes or new class names to the iPlayer, just for consistency, to be honest. iPlayer link and the next on link. I used two different standards in the previous video, and so really I've just gone with trying to use the hyphen method to keep everything consistent, otherwise it can get a bit confusing. So we will go look at the primary article class, the iPlayerLink class, and the NextOn class. You'll notice what I've done to them is I've set their colour to dark red as we did last week, but then I've created a new class called secondary article for all the other articles that are there to change their colour, and both of them have got text decoration set to none, so there'll be no underlining. So I'll just scroll down to the HTML that relates to that first. So the HTML relates to the class changes. Just close a few bits. I'll close the main down for now. That'll get rid of the big part. Close the nav down. So primary article, we had that already. You can see the class for that there. I'm not sure if we had this paragraph filled and this link and list item. I don't think we did. This is new. So paragraph of information, and then being a little bit lazy, should strictly speaking put this in an unordered list. However, there is only one list item in that list, and we're just using this for the bullet point more than anything. So a link surrounding that list item with watch now on iPlayer will give the effect. So let's go look at the text first. This is the text that relates to, so you can see where the bullet point comes in, where the paragraph comes in. But the positioning actually, there's quite a lot going on with padding in this section, in the articles that are contained within it, and margins and things to make sure that they're tighter together than they would be by default. We had a class of iPlayerLink before. I've renamed it to iPlayerLink with hyphens. You can keep yours the same name, that's fine. Just bear in mind that if I do anything else to the rules, you need to be aware of the name change and either keep yours consistent to what you've used or use what I'm using. So the article class there of NextOn and iPlayerLink. Inside of both those articles, I've then inserted a span. This is after everything else, so you can see the span that we created last week has ended, but before the article there's the closing of the article tag. So this span has a class of article footer, a meaningful name. It's got a link, doesn't go anywhere yet. All available episodes. Outside of the link is a bit of text that's not hyperlinked, which is the number in brackets. And you'll see something very similar in the next article, NextOn. So if we look at what they look at like at the end, that's what they will look like. And there are different links to the rest of this box, basically, as they would be in reality. All the other articles have now had the class secondary article inserted. So the way that I did that was just start typing class. I'm just going to delete the class for a second so you can see it working, because you can't use the attribute more than once, even though you can have as many classes as you want. So there we go, class, secondary article, and then it was a case of just highlight that bit, copy it, and paste it into every article after that point. And all that does is it changes the colour from kind of burgundy red to black, as we can see there. So whilst we're in the HTML, other additions in the HTML, if you go down to the bottom of the page that you had before this lesson, you would reach this closing of the section after the articles, and these two lines here are the new bits that I've added in. So I put in a section ID related links, which is where you would put content related links, and then section ID for similar programs, same thing, looks slightly different there. How you populate them is up to you. You could use the grid technique as before with the articles, and that would work fine. So those are the bits of HTML we're adding in. I'm going to leave them alone for a little bit and come back to the positioning relating to the articles and how they look. Okay, so this looks pretty scary, but it's actually a way of saving having to write this line here several times over. So this comma is what you use to separate a selector. So you can have this selector here, which is a compound, as you may remember, targeting the main content, article, and any H2 within there. Same with any H3 that lives in there, same with any paragraph that lives in there, and same with any article listing. That's nearly everything that's inside of the article, but not the image. We don't want the image to fill the box and not have any kind of padding around it. So the padding's set to left by 10 pixels. We're going to have a look at the page. Pretty much everything has got a 10 pixel padding. I'll try and make it a bit more obvious by knocking it up to 50 for a second. And you'll notice there that it becomes quite a big piece of padding. And I'll just knock it back down to 10 again. So you can see it's just a little touch there to make things neater. Looking at the original and the way we did it before, we did put a little bit of padding onto the main content, article H2, and any H3 and any paragraph. So this line here is what's gone, basically, and this line here is also gone. So you'll be deleting those lines, and they get replaced by this line here for the padding, and the text color is being replaced by secondary article A, and then we've got this rule here for primary article A, iPlayer link A, and next on A. So all of those links, any text contained within them, becomes dark red or black respectively. The primary article has stayed the same, but I have added a little bit of padding at the bottom of it, 50 pixels padding. So let's have a quick look at that. It's this area here underneath there. Otherwise, it's a bit tight. If I just knock the padding off for a second, you'll see it gets a bit tight at the bottom. We put 20 pixels on, it might look a little bit neater. So you can have a play with that, see what works for you. I think I might actually go with 20 or 30 pixels. So we started at this point, and we put this part in. Secondary article needs to go in. This line here needs to go in, padding bottom. Now, we've got a new type of selector just hiding away here. So again, this is a series of compounds doing the same thing. So we've said anything in the main content that is a H2 heading 2 or a H3 should only have a margin of 8 pixels top and bottom. If I knock that off for a second and see what it looks like, so I'll take the margin top away for a second. You'll see that it puts in a bigger margin, and if I take away the margin bottom as well, then it becomes even more spaced out, and we just want to tighten that up a touch. You could do a little bit more in this area here, but once you've got the technique and you know that what you're doing is you're changing the margins to things, or changing the padding. Like all headings have an amount of margin by default, and it's usually quite a big amount. All block level elements have some kind of margin. So your headings, your paragraphs, they have a little bit of margin put in above, below, and sometimes to the sides too. And so we're just fiddling with that. We're also fiddling with it on the paragraph, but this is a special selector here, and hopefully it will make a bit of sense. We've used the colon before to access hovering, but now we're saying the first of type. So that means inside of the identifier main content, which is our section, or the first section that we've used, we have paragraphs, but I only want to change the very first paragraph inside of there. So it's inside of its parent. So every first paragraph, in this case this series 3 bit here and here, this bit here about zooming goes head to head, those paragraphs that we can see all are affected by this. So again, if I take those two rules out and have a look at those paragraphs again, you will see them spaced out some more. So it's affecting them too. Then a new rule. This is a long rule, probably the biggest piece of work to do. And this relates to the new article footer class that we have created. I'll just return you to that point to see it one more time. So they go inside of the first, the iPlayer link article, and then the killing next on article. I'm just going to space them out a little bit so you can see them better. Yeah, so at the bottom of them, before the closing tag, there's the closing tag. That's where that span comes in. You can see the class that's being used, article footer. So looking at the article footer, we're going for the specifics. So we're going direct, main content, article footer. I'm just doing that to be consistent. You could just put main content dot article footer, and it should pick it up fine. This is where the position of the main content itself is important for it to work. So I've set the footer to what is known as absolute. Normally what absolute does is it allows it to be positioned specifically anywhere in the document that you tell it to go. But if it's combined with a parent level element that is set to relative, like this, so the article, main content article, has been set to position relative. It doesn't do anything to the main content article, which is why I've done this technique this way, because we've used the grid to lay things out. It could be a bit more tricky if you were actually using a positioning method other than that, but this works the way that we are doing it today. So the position relative is being there just for this technique. So if I take that line out for a second, and take the position relative out from the article, and we go back, notice what it does there. It breaks it. Oops. By putting it back in, it works in combination with this. So I've got the position set as absolute. The display block matters as well for this, because the span tends to be an inline thing. And the width of 90% makes a difference. If I set that up to 100%, it will go outside of the box to the right hand side, mainly because of margin to the left. Now, I would have liked to have positioned this using auto to the left and right to position it perfectly, but because we're using absolute, that has an impact on the ability to use the margin auto technique that we have used earlier on. If we just want to recap on that margin auto, we've used that on the main. So we've got a width set, and then we set the margin left and right. So we can see the page, and what it's doing is it's creating this margin to the left and to the right, and it should be even. That's why the left and right auto works. But look what happens when I set the position to absolute. That breaks that technique. As you can see, everything's back to normal now because the position, the space in the margin here is back again. So we don't change anything there, just showing you the technique elsewhere in the document. So this article footer, we've set up margin left a little bit. We've also got this border top, which will take up the full width based upon whatever we set the width to be. So you can see this line here, just a border top. It doesn't have to be the way it is. It could be like 5 pixels and it's a bit more obvious then, but the BBC tend to use the fine line ones. A 1 pixel would be a little bit thin. I think 2 pixels is probably the best way to do that. And then we've got some padding at the top and the bottom, and that just puts the space around the text to give it some space to breathe. We take those 2 lines away for a second, you'll see how crushed it becomes at the bottom of the box. And oops, spacing is everything, as you'll find out hopefully by moving these things around. Ooh, 2 bits that we've put in since last week actually. Not that difficult. We just put 2 headings in before the images in those 2 boxes. So if we look at the iPlayer link article, let me just put it right there, you will see that I've inserted a H2 before the image. So there's the H2, and you can just see the start of the image there on iPlayer. And then the same for the next on, just before the image, H2, close H2, IMG is just next to it. And that is putting this in here. It's not linked, but then neither are the images. In the actual page, they do hyperlink the images. You can do that as well. All it would take to do is to move the start of the link from where we have it to either before the H2 or before the image. And I'll just have a quick look at the iPlayer link again. Need to change the position of the A there as well now to go outside of the span, because it was inside of the span. And now you can see the pointer changing there. So if you would like it to operate, none of the other images have got hyperlinks either, that way, then what you will need to do is to change the position of the link so that it surrounds, encapsulates the elements that you want to it to contain. So originally we had it inside of the span, here and here, and that just meant it surrounds the H3 and the paragraphs and anything else that's inside of that span. But you can do it to include the H2 and everything. So have a little play with that. Don't be too scared. It's quite easily fixed if you do break the link. So then we're down to these 2 bits here. Again, just a reminder of what we put in. The 2 sections at the end. These 2 lines here are what you've inserted. Nothing particularly special about them. 2 new sections. They'll contain articles at some point. They've got headings in. This heading, it's got a border bottom. The box itself has got a specific height set. And I could have done the same for similar programs too. So there's just 2 tiny little techniques that I wanted to make sure you could use before you move on to your own work, if you haven't already. So there's 2 rules for each. Related links there, similar programs there. And remember, you can do anything you want. If you want to, target similar programs, hover and change it when someone rolls over it, or the same for related links, you can do that, and you can change any property at all quite easily in most cases. So related links, I've been using the biscuit color bisque color for backgrounds on all of these elements. To be honest, it's not the exact color that the BBC used, but it's close enough. And I'm quite a big fan of using the word colors. So there's a few different ways that you can name a color. We have used named. I think we've also used, we've used hexadecimal, or at least we're going to use hexadecimal if I haven't already, and we've used RGBAs as well somewhere. Oh yeah, we used RGBA in the menu, didn't we? There we go. Red, green, blue, alpha for that one. And we've probably used RGB somewhere else. It's not uncommon to mix your colour standards. If you've got access to a good graphics program like Photoshop, you could calculate all your colours to be in one specific standard, and that would be really useful, I suppose, for standardization, consistency, kind of thing you'd do if you work in a team. It's not the end of the world, but those little things do make debugging things a bit easier. So the background colour for related links is set to disk. I've set a height of 100 pixels, so if you see the default, it will only take up the space that it needs to, unless you tell it otherwise. So in this case, I'm telling it otherwise. Same with the padding. Padding is mainly for the text in this heading, but it does add a little spacing around the border as well, as you can see there. Margin top is just to put some pixels of space above the heading, as you can see there. Otherwise it gets flush to the section previous, so we just want that little gap in there. Related links, heading 2. The margin top is quite interesting. So you see this is what the default margin is. Put that back in there, and you get a slightly smaller. Well, it's not. There's no margin at all. It's the padding of related links that's changing that spacing. So if I just take that line out and this line out for a second, you go and have a look at it. You see it's pushed right to the top. And so it's the combination of things. The padding goes on the inside of the box. The margin goes on the outside. So that's the margin. That's the padding. And then we've got this black solid thin border bottom. I don't think the BBC site uses the same colour. I think they use a kind of dark red colour. We could easily do that as well, or choose one of the colours we're already using. And this is a shortcut. You can create a rule for each property, so it could be border bottom hyphen, colour border bottom hyphen, style border bottom hyphen, width. But instead we're just using border bottom, setting the 3 properties at the same time. It saves us time in work terms. So that's the related links. Similar programs. Okay, so because I'm using the margin auto, which is affecting everything else, again I've used the position absolute to break out of that. Because if you can see here, similar programs section is margined around the outside, which is okay, but in the original they actually make that section go the full width, as they do with their main BBC menu at the top. If you look at this, so that main BBC menu, which I'd like you to have a go on your own terms at, would be a nav. It would contain an unordered list. That unordered list would then contain links and list items, and you can see each of them have got different approaches. These are the main ones, are pretty much the same as each other. That technique there, what they're trying, it's actually got a black border at the bottom the whole time, all of them, so that all you do when you're hovering over is changing that border at the bottom to a different colour, which is good. Search bar will just be a text field, input text, but it could really be anything. You could put a div in there or a paragraph in there and turn it into input if you wanted to, but the correct way to do it, because it's input, is to use input type text, as we did in our previous example in class. Similar thing with the search bar. So pretty confident you can probably come somewhere close to that. But the positioning for that is absolute. It's got no margin at the top. It's padding being used on the sides. And each one of these boxes has been made sort of like standardized by the padding it's got around either the link or the list item. And these two here are treated as special cases. You could just have them the same size. It's just, you know, proving that you can put a standardized menu at the top there, which would be something you'd consider in your NEA to make it seem like it's part of a bigger site. So there's our related links. It's not going to take much for you to put them in there. Similarly, you could fill this section with article boxes, you know, use grid again, put 3 or 4 columns in, however you want to do it. There's nothing left here that you haven't done before, really. These are just lists, separate lists, probably made to look like they're one big one. These are just links with margins between them. So there's nothing else there that you can't take on with what we've already done. Back to the example. So the last few bits are not similar programs. So because I've used absolute position, I can then set the left to 0. A quick look at that. Otherwise, what happens is it's still taking up that margin order, or starting in that position, but it's overflowing its box and going off the page like that. And if we can avoid having that, then that's brilliant. Plus, at the same time, we've got a specific style that we're looking for where it feels like it fills the full page. Margin left then allows us to position. Well, it just jumps all the way at the bottom of the document, so that's what I clicked on. Margin left is more to do with positioning it. Actually, let's just turn that off for a second. I don't actually need the margin left anymore. It's something I was using before, so we can get rid of that. Margin top we still need though. You can see there, otherwise it bunches up to the section before. Just show that again, didn't stay on very long. See, bunched up, back in, space there from the margin. Background colour, that's the same colour we've used on the BBC website, so I'll take that as faithful. And width, this is important for it, otherwise it will only be as wide as the text that's within it, or the content that is within that section. Width 100%. Try to use relative values if you can for everything. Some areas you might not be able to manage it, but it's better if you've got that, because then your page is a little bit more responsive to resizing. And then we've got the colour of the text. You can see there it's white. It looks, it doesn't actually look that white because of the red colour in the background, which is interesting. Perception of colour. And then we've got the margin left, just to push that in a little bit, otherwise it's right across there. A lot of websites use this kind of like approach of making it feel like there's something that covers the full page, but then also everything feels aligned, and quite often there's a lot of jiggery pokery goes on behind the scenes. Even with our style sheet, which is getting on for about 100 lines long, which isn't too bad. If we were to go and look at the KillingEve website and have a look at the inspect element, and then just see the ludicrous amount of lines that there are there when you start opening things up, using your divs inside of your divs, inside of your divs, inside of your divs, inside of your divs, inside of your divs. And the reason this site is so complicated, twofold. One, they try to track users to the absolute nth degree, and then secondly, because it's part of a humongous site, and so they have to have quite a lot of style sheets going into it. So it's what I call verbose, but there's, if you're working on a huge website, you're going to come across that kind of level of verbose code. When you're working on your own, you have the privilege of being able to simplify it to the level that we have done. Okay, so that's the end of the example and activity. As I said, what I'd like you to attempt on your own now is put in the links in this section here. Maybe put in some boxes for similar programs in. Just go to the website, pinch a couple of images, and make up the program names if you have to. It's just about putting some content in. And then the big challenge, can you put a navigation in that looks anything like that? Even if it's just a list of text links, that's fine. Don't worry about these images, although they are in the Teams folder if you need them.